Hi, my name is Rrr and welcome to PGS All Stars. I started PGS All Stars so that PGS members could get to know other PGS members and find out more about one another. Today, I'm joined with two very special gentlemen from the Twin Flicks channel, and these guys are longtime members of the Post Geek Singularity. Welcome, Paul and Simon Gilmore. How are you both today?
Doing pretty good.
Doing great. You know, as twins, we tend to talk over each other, so we're going to try not to do that too much.
But well, yeah, I'm fine if you guys do that. I have no problem if you do that. It's just so great to see you both here, and you've been such a big part of the PGS and making the PGS what it is, and this is really just such an exciting interview for me today to do. So I'm just so happy to have you both here. And I did want to ask my first question to both of you, and you can answer it in any order that you like. Can you please tell me if you both have a background in the entertainment field, and what are some of your own experiences in filmmaking?
Well, we have a little bit of a background. We dabbled in it a little bit. One of our best friends, Tyler Hawes, he actually went to college for filmmaking, and he worked on a couple of Adam Green films. He worked on Frozen, Hatchet 1 and 2. And so we kind of tagged along, I guess you could say. And from then we learned more about, we never went to school for filmmaking. We learned on our own. And did I freeze up there?
No, you're good.
Okay. So we always, from when we were, as long as we could remember, we always loved film and always loved filmmaking. And I mean, our first clear memory of a film that we saw in a theater was E.T. And we were 4 years old, I believe. And we still remember that so clearly, watching E.T. in a theater. And ever since then, as long as we can remember, we've always just loved film. And as we got older in our teenage years, we started noticing how the movies put together with the writing, the directing, the cinematography, the music. And so we started looking at the credits at the beginning of the film. And then we started writing down the names, and we started following who did the score to the movie, who did who was the DP on the movie, who was the writer, the director. And we, instead of following the main actors that typically people do, we started studying and following the people who actually were behind the scenes of made the movies, who made these movies possible. And
it's interesting because, like Paul said, the typical person says, "Oh, it's a Harrison Ford movie. I'm going to go see that. I love Harrison Ford." We would look at it and go, "Yeah, but who's making it?" Because a great actor such as Harrison Ford can still make a really bad movie, and he has, actually, depending on who's
behind it. It's Harrison Ford.
So we would always pay more attention to who's behind the scenes. Like, we'll go, "Oh, okay, this guy directed it. It's going to be a good movie," or he edited it. James Horner does the music. We're going to go see that, no matter what the movie was.
In fact, there was times when we were really big into James Horner, the composer, right. And I mean, we're huge fans of him, that we would actually go see a movie just because he did the music. I remember there was a couple movies, the Spitfire Grill. Have you heard of that?
Yes, I have.
Yeah. So when that came out, we didn't know anything about it, and we wanted to see it just because James Horner did the music.
Right.
And we asked a friend, "Hey, you want to go see this movie?" And he looks it up. He says, "This sounds, no, not really." And then he said, "Why do you want to see this?" And we said, "Well, James Horner does the music." "Who?" And we're like, "Oh, well, okay, well, we'll go on our own." I mean, we started seeing movies just because of the composer.
And to rewind a little bit, we pretty much influenced Tyler, our friend Tyler, into movie making, because he really didn't have anything, know what any of it was. And when we go over to his house and watch a movie, like I remember watching Top Gun and whatever and he'd be like, what is it? How do they do that? And we would talk film lingo, and he'd be like, what are you talking about? And so we kind of taught him what we're learning. And he had a friend that made a couple movies in the 70s, and he introduced us to him, and we were talking to each other on camera shots, like a Dutch angle and, you know, all this stuff. And afterwards, Ty was like, I had no idea what you guys were talking about. And so we influenced him to start doing his own stuff, because he's a very technical type person, very smart. And so we knew he'd be good at like model making or production, things like that. And writing, he's a very good writer. And so when we were younger, we always planned that he would write a movie and Paul and I would direct it. It never really came due to, you know, just things happen. But yeah, I mean, since a very early age, I remember, you know, being like 9 years old and just being fascinated with how the movie is made. You know, like, how did they create that shot? One thing that I never understood is movies, when dialogues are going on between two people and the camera cuts between the two people, how come the dialogue is still going? You know, instead of stopping when they cut. And I'm like, and then you know, we do our own research, like, oh, okay, they use two cameras and they use a separate audio equipment, and they edit
because when we were younger, you know, our dad bought a Hi8 camcorder, and so Simon and I would take the camcorder and try to imitate what we saw of how they made the films, and then we would make our own film based on what we saw. And we were like, well, we can't cut to a different scene and still have me talking when I'm showing you. So how do we do that?
So and I'm like, pause in the middle of talking, like we go, hey, John, and then we'll cut to the other.
And it actually worked. And that's where I really learned about the art of editing. And we would have a VCR, a TV, and the Hi8 camcorder, and we would connect the RCA cables from the VCR to the camcorder, and then we would stop, pause, or play, pause of where we wanted to go. It took forever to do, but we learned how to edit, and we were pretty good at it, where we learned how to do it where it became seamless. And then so we did that for a number of years. And then, of course, you know, technology evolved, and now you can do it so easily on your phone even. But back then it took hours to do a 15-minute movie.
We would do titles, just print them on a piece of paper and film them going down. And then like music, we would put music into it, and we didn't know about soundboards or sound mixer stuff yet. So we would just play it on our stereo, turn up the volume, and we would have the music. And it worked. I mean, it was cheap, you could tell, but it worked pretty effectively. A lot of our friends were impressed. And later on, we showed a couple ones in the professional business. They wanted to see a reel of it. And so we'd show them some of our older stuff like that, and they'd be impressed. They'd be like, wow, that was pretty good, guys. I've never seen anybody do that good on such a I mean, they say no string budget, which it can be like a couple.
No budget at all.
We had nothing.
Yeah, and I talked to Rob about this on one of his shows, but we actually sent a short film we did to Steven Spielberg, to Amblin Entertainment, and our dad sent it, and we got a letter back, and I've got it up here somewhere, but you know, and it was just that's how we learned how to develop our skills as filmmakers. Is we were self-taught. We never went to school for it. And as we got older, you know, 17, 18, 19 years old, we started hearing from people like Robert Rodriguez, Quentin Tarantino in interviews where they said film school is pointless. There's no need for film school. If you have it, you have it, and you learn to use it, and you learn to use the skills. And you know, that's what we did is we learned how to tune the skills and our I guess sensibility of how to make films, because we studied how they were made when we were younger, and we just developed them as we got older.
Tarantino would say that he learned how to make films by watching movies. That's the exact same way that we did it. And not to say that film school's bad, or some people don't need it. It just didn't work for them. And you know, I've delved into some courses, and I'm like, well, I already know this stuff. I don't need to know anymore. And when you're on a film set, you learn so much just by watching. You learn what kind of lenses you need to use. You just learn so much just by being there in the atmosphere. And so a couple of the indie films that we have been on, that just furthered our education and stuff. And we've directed a few movies, nothing you would have heard of, but we directed a few indie movies, and they got some attention, very little attention, but we still did it and honed our craft. And
we never really, I don't know why, but we never really sent them into any kind of festivals. I don't know why we never did that, but we would show them to other filmmakers we've met some filmmakers. We met Eli Roth and a couple other filmmakers. We showed them some of our stuff that we would do, and they were impressed. They said, "Why aren't you doing more of this?" And we just, families always come first to us, and that's the main reason why we never really got into filmmaking, because it takes so much time. I mean, even just making a short film can take a year or more, and then making a feature film, even if it's an indie, it could take up to 2 years, and a studio film could take even more than that. And it just takes too much time. And we, our parents were getting older, and we ended up moving from one place to another. And so just circumstances, situations, we just never allowed us to really get to where we always wanted to be. But we did.
We moved maybe 4 times to 21 different places within a 7-year period, which is a lot for us. Just different jobs here and there. And go ahead.
But we always wanted to go back to filmmaking. So we just kept making our own films wherever we were. And we would get in touch with the indie circuit, talk to people. In fact, we talked to, I don't remember her last name, Monica. Do you remember her, Simon?
Yeah.
And she would travel the world producing indie films. I don't remember her last name, but we got in touch with her, and she actually got us in touch with some financiers that finance films. And so we have a lot of contacts, but again, we just never really did anything with it. I did start my own studio, Symmetry Studios. It wasn't really for filmmaking, but it was, I shot like music videos, some fashion promos. I was hired to do some big names in Texas. Did some promotional videos for them. So that was kind of our outlet. Since we couldn't actually do filmmaking for a studio, that was our outlet of still making short films.
And the writer David Coop, he wrote Jurassic Park and worked a lot with Spielberg and stuff. When we were living in California, I actually bumped into him at Hollywood Video, and this was when Panic Room was being shot in production, and he wrote it. I wrote the screenplay for that. So, and I never met him before, but I recognized his picture from like IMDb or whatever.
Right.
And so I'm like, "Are you David Cup?" And he's like, "Yeah. Who are you? Do I know you?" So I introduced myself and said I'm a huge fan and stuff. And he asked if he could see some of our work. And so I sent him an email of a couple little things that we did. And he, like Paul said earlier, that they encouraged us. They're like, "Why aren't you guys in the business? What's going on, guys?" And, it just, like Paul said, family came first. It just never happened. But no matter where we were, we always filmed something. We always did something creative, whether it be writing or just making our own short films, music videos, doing whatever. And the last
when we were in California, we were also script readers for a while, so we read scripts. But I guess you could say we dabbled in filmmaking, but we never really got to where we ever wanted to be. And but we always, I mean, to this day, we always shoot film, shoot little films, do things here and there. And since we have had contact with you know, some big names, directors in Hollywood, whether they're in the indie circuit or not, at least we know from their feedback, we know that we could have made it. And that's
Good.
right. Yeah, that's really good enough for us, because we know we can't really go in that direction. So at least we know we could have made it some form or another in the business. So, you know, so does that answer your question?
It does. It's exactly what I wanted to know. And I think it's very important. Although you did mention you did discuss some of this stuff with Rob on the channel previously, it's always good for people to find out a little bit more about, you know, the creative process and about the filmmaking process. And, you know, what I like about what you two said is the idea of, you know, you didn't go to film school, but you certainly have studied everything you could on your own to make sure that you know how a film is made, what it's entailed, how long it could possibly take, you know, and what it really means to get involved in filmmaking in general.
One thing
and I think,
I'm sorry. One thing that helped a lot too was when we started getting into laser discs and they had the audio commentaries from directors and writers, producers. I mean, even before we even saw the movie, if it's something we didn't see before, we would immediately go to the audio commentaries and we'd be transfixed on what they were saying and write down stuff and doing things. And we would try it on our own without having the other people helping us or putting money into it. We would try it on our own, see how we could do it ourselves. And it always worked out pretty good. And so you know, now we got Blu-rays, 4Ks, DVDs with audio commentaries galore and making ofs. And so anyone who wants to learn filmmaking, just listen to those commentaries. It really helps a lot.
Yeah, listening to the commentaries, you know, we started getting into all the special features before, at least people we knew of didn't even know that those existed. And so, as Simon said, yeah, those really helped a lot. And it was basically our film schools, watching those commentaries, watching the making ofs. Back then, you know, you would have like The Abyss with the Abyss special edition. They had almost 2-hour making of how they did that. Today, you don't really get that, which is a shame. But if you go back to the older releases, you can find all that. And I think you find a lot of stuff on YouTube as well. Mm-hmm. So if you have the passion and the drive, you can watch those and dissect them and watch them in detail. And that can be your film school.
Yeah, you don't need, you know, a lot of these filmmakers come from wealthy backgrounds, or their parents or relatives are already in the business, and so they're well off already. But you don't need to wait for a producer to come in. You don't need to wait for someone to wave $1,000 in your face. Just do it yourself. Do it as good as you possibly can. And if it's not great, just keep trying. Just keep practicing, because sooner or later it will end up being pretty good, good enough to go on an independent circuit. And yeah, just keep on going. You don't need big fancy equipment and stuff. I mean, when we found out about our friend Tyler told us about, said, why don't you get a sound mixer? Like, what is that? We didn't know what that was. And so he showed us it because he had one. We're like, oh, okay. And his cost like, I don't know, $500 or something. So we went to a place and we got like a $90 one, I think it was, just this cheap little tiny one. And we started using that to incorporate sounds and music and stuff. So you don't need a lot of money to make a decent film. You just need to practice and
the passion.
And passion. That's the thing. You can't give up. You can't stop. You know, it's like exercising a muscle. You stop exercising, that muscle deteriorates and slowly dies off. Same thing with making movies. If you stop making them, that skill, that passion is going to die off, and you're not going to want to do it anymore. So just keep doing it. Keep pushing on.
That's excellent advice, and I think it's going to be very encouraging to a lot of the members who watch this, and even other people who may be seeing this video, and just to realize that there's many stages too in the development or of a film, and you know, we're very lucky to have, you know, I wonder when they stopped making the special features as a norm. Was it about 15 years ago, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I noticed it as DVDs started getting more and more popular. I started noticing them dwindling down. And then when Blu-ray came out, that's pretty much when they kind of stopped putting all these special features. I mean, you can find them like, you know, it's kind of like, thank God for Arrow Video and Shout Factory, because they put a ton of that stuff on there when the studios, they don't. And if you've watched Rob's observations, you've heard him talk about that, where studios just don't want to put the money into these anymore, into the making ofs anymore, because they feel that nobody really wants to watch them. And you know, even though those that are interested in filmmaking is a small percentage, it's still there, and that's what fans want, especially on physical media. They want all that content.
Yeah, and you know, you every now and then you'll get something like the Lord of the Rings director's cuts, the extended cuts. They come with like hours and hours of behind the scene footage. So every once in a while you will get a company, especially if it's more independent, like Shock Factor or Arrow, they'll just flood it with supplement materials and, you know, 2 or 3 different commentaries and stuff. So, you know, when that happens, it's a gold mine. It's like you need to get it.
Well, recently a friend of mine bought me a copy of Get Out because I liked the movie so much, and I noticed that the director, whose name is it Jordan Peele?
Yeah.
Jordan Peele decided to put in, I guess, a director's cut with an audio commentary along with it, which it would have to be, or maybe sometimes they don't always include an audio commentary, but in his it did. And I was so glad that I listened to it, because it's not that I had, to be honest with you, I watched the film and I loved the film, and there were certain things in the film that he mentioned that I was completely oblivious to. So yeah. Sometimes it's great to even get, you know, that feedback, because the director already had an intention for that scene. I interpreted it completely differently, and he would say, and here, of course, is where, you know, this happens. And I said, oh, that's what that was for. So
yeah,
it's really interesting. You know, movies, you know, it means different things to different people, and of course, the director has his vision of setting it out. And like you said, little things that the director is like, I want to put this in a movie. A lot of times it's just for them. It's not for the audience. It's just for them, because it's like kind of an inside joke to them, or inside information to them, that they're going to put something like that in a movie that the average person wouldn't even think about or interpret differently. But yeah, the commentaries are really, really good.
Yes.
And some that are kind of, you can tell that are kind of like, I don't want to do this kind of thing. usually if the director or whoever's doing the commentary has a host asking him questions, that's when you know the director doesn't really want to do a commentary. But majority of the time, they're all up for it. I'll tell you, one of the best commentaries I ever heard was for Dodgeball, with the Will Ferrell movie.
Yes,
that was
that commentary. That is the greatest commentary you will ever hear. It is amazing.
It's hilarious. You have to hear that. Halfway through, you hear Ben Stiller coming in the back. I think it's Ben Stiller coming in the background, and he's like, you hear him eating chips, and he's like, "What's going on here?" And he's like, "Oh, finally you came!" And then you hear him start a bunch of banter back and forth and stuff like that, and then all of a sudden it just. They start arguing, and then they say, "Okay, well, that's it," and then they cut it to a completely different audio commentary to a completely different movie over what you're seeing of Dodgeball, and it is the best. It is hilarious.
Yeah, because it starts out straight, and you got Vince Vaughn talking about it, and then it just slowly creeps in the commentary, and every time Vince Vaughn's on camera, he's like, "Oh, here I am, the greatest actor on this movie." It's just one of the best commentaries.
You know, it's funny too that you know, these additional materials that are made, and they're so important, honestly, in recording you know, sort of this process for an individual film. It's very individualized, right? And so, you know, by not getting that experience and understanding what's going on behind the scenes, it's not that you can't enjoy the film, but you do kind of lose something, you know. I feel like they've lost something when someone doesn't produce something like that. And one example of that is there was a behind the scenes or special features of Master and Commander.
Oh, yeah.
And it's actually on YouTube and you can find it. And they talked about how the cast was made in Mexico and how the cast lived on the boat during the making of the film. And you can actually see the sort of the rapport that the cast members have with one another, like they are an actual crew together. And so, you know, I think it's very important. You could read about it, but to actually see their reactions and the way that they are around one another can give you a sense, like if you ever wanted to make a film like that, you know, what important features or important aspects you need to focus on in order for it to be believable. And so
with such an ensemble cast like that, you need that. You need them to all be together and get to know each other so they can play off one another during the movie. And
you know, I've movies even back at like Full Metal Jacket. They had Stanley Kubrick had the cast go into a boot camp where they lived together. Saving Private Ryan did the same thing, and other movies did the same thing. And I've had The Outsiders of Coppola. He had the cast basically living together in a house. And I've been asked by friends, why do they put them in boot camp? What's the point? They're actors? They're supposed to act? That's their job. And it wasn't until I watched the kind of making of that you were talking about, the behind the scenes, where it showed how important that is. When you have a big cast like that, it doesn't matter. It can be the greatest actor in the world. If you have a big cast and you put them together, they form a rapport, they form a friendship, and it comes off on the screen, just as you were saying.
Yeah.
So it's really important.
I remember going back to Quentin Tarantino with Reservoir Dogs. He said that the cast wasn't really getting along well if you didn't have like they knew each other like they do in the movie or something. And he said that he was trying to figure out what to do to get these people together. And he said finally dawned on him that the cast really never got it together and had any fun together or do anything together. So on a weekend when they weren't shooting, he had everybody come over to his house and they had a big barbecue for an entire day. And he said after that, after they got to know each other, personal lives and everything, then the cast, then it got to where it is. The cast knew each other and had great fun with each other. And Coppola is the king of this. I don't know if you've ever heard the commentary to Dracula, but he brought the entire cast and the crew in an isolated area in a cabin somewhere. And he would go as far as having Keanu Reeves and Winona Ryder tossing a ball to each other. And they'd be like, what does that have to do with the movie? And he would say, because it gets your reflexes going so that you can, figuratively bounce off one another. But this is like literally.
You can anticipate what each other's.
Yeah, anticipate each other's, what they're going to be doing next. And so, that might be a little extreme to most people because you really don't need to do that. But, he does it and it works for him. But, just getting the cast together before shooting is something that is really, really important.
I'll tell you one thing that I used to do when I was filming some promo spots and I had a couple of actors. I would do the trust fall test where I would have the actor have their back towards another actor and I would say, okay, now fall. And after hesitation, they fall and the other actor catches them. I did that a couple times back and forth between the two actors, and it built, they started having fun with it, and it built trust and a rapport. And then their acting was so much better. Like you could feel that they were, I don't know if connected is the right word, but you could feel that they were together. They were in sync with the same, with their acting and because they became friends and they trusted each other.
Yeah, it reminds me of what they said about the HBO miniseries Band of Brothers. What they said on that is, they went through boot camp And then they got together and just spent time together, the cast, and they said that we literally became a band of brothers outside of the movie. And so that's what it does. And it just calms everybody down. You're glad to see the person come in when you see them for their day of shooting. And so it just relaxes everybody and everybody has a good time. The worst thing you want to do is have a bad time on set and have the actors not get along or the crew not get along. That's the worst.
Well, I really do appreciate you going in and talking about not only the experiences that you've had, but also imparting a lot of your knowledge in this interview for the viewers who are going to be seeing this video. Obviously, the point of doing this type of an interview is so that we can all learn more from one another, but also to see what our fellow PGS members are doing, in their work. And segueing into that, I know you both YouTube creators in addition to all of this, and you have a YouTube channel. And I want to know, when did you start your YouTube channel and why did you start it?
So we started in February of 2016. And this was, I always thought of YouTube as that's where you go if you want to watch a cat play around. I didn't really think about it as this kind of forum. And then I started seeing John Campia with their Collider show. I started watching that. And I'm like, wow, okay. And I remember the first time I saw a movie review, I was thinking to myself, it was late at night, I couldn't sleep, and I was thinking to myself, I really miss Siskel and Ebert. I miss them to death. I love I love those type of shows. And I was thinking, is there anything like that anymore on there? And so I started searching on YouTube movie reviews, and the first movie review I saw on YouTube was from Good Bad Flicks. I don't know if you know their channel. He does a lot of really great reviews of older like cult movies and horror movies, but he did a 30-minute in-depth review of Superman, Man of Steel, Man of Steel, and that was the first review I saw on YouTube. And then that sparked a light bulb went off in my head, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, we know film, we know filmmaking. We all, as we said before, we really can't get into the business of making films, but I want to get that out. I want to get that, my knowledge, and that I want to have an outlet for it. And so I thought, okay, well, obviously if they're making movie reviews on YouTube, then I can do something. Why not? I've got the equipment, so let's do it.
I was stupid.
Huh?
I originally thought it was stupid. I was like, who's going to watch this? Like, what's going on?
Yeah. And I just
watching some of them, and I'm like, yeah, this.
Yeah. And I told Simon, I'm like, you know what? It doesn't matter if people watch it or not. It's an outlet. We have an outlet to share our creativity and our knowledge, and it's an outlet. And so, we don't have very many subscribers. I think we're almost at 3,000 subscribers now. But over the years, it's trial and error of what works for you and your channel. And I started off doing kind of review analysis, and it didn't really get that many views, didn't really go anywhere. Then I started reviewing Blu-rays, and that started piquing more interest. And now what I'm started doing is doing a comparison between 4K UHD and Blu-ray, and that's really taking off. So I'm showing screenshots between the 4K and the Blu-ray, putting it side by side, and while I'm giving my review of the quality of the 4K, and people seem to really like that. But go ahead.
We'll throw in little skits here and there, and do different segments like our Inside Film.
Did I go out?
Yeah, you froze a little.
Yeah,
bit.
You're frozen, Paul.
Oh, my computer just completely went blank.
We can hear you, but your picture is just.
There you go.
There you are.
Or
did you? It looked like it jumped a little bit.
Well, my screen is blank, so I can't see.
Oh, yeah, it's frozen. It's frozen.
We can still hear you, Paul.
Okay.
If that's all right.
You just can't see my smiling face. That's fine. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we have a still of you, but oh wait, it looks like you might be back. I did want to ask you, you know, because yes, and I'm sorry for cutting you off. So, you know, kind of leading into what you mentioned about doing reviews of 4Ks and other types of formats of video. Do you find that there are overall inconsistencies in the quality of transfers when a film is taken from, let's say, one format to another? And what do you think is the reason for the inconsistencies of the transfer?
Well, I'll give you a really good example of inconsistencies, and that's with The Matrix. When it was first released on DVD, it looked good. It looked like how it was supposed to. Then when it went to Blu-ray, all of a sudden everything had this green tint on it. And I remember reading reviews and going to Blu-ray group rooms, and they're saying, "What's with all the green?" And so I looked up the information and I did my research, and I found out that Warner Brothers actually went in and added this green tint through the whole movie without giving any kind of consideration to what the Wachowskis, the directors of the film, wanted it to look like. So they just went out, the studio just went and did it themselves without including their input. And so when the 4K came out, they were doing this for 4K for the 20th anniversary. The Wachowskis, they wanted to be part of it because they wanted to correct the issues that Warner Brothers did. And so they went in and they worked closely with whoever did the restoration, and they redid all the colors to where it was intended to be seen in. And so that green tint is gone, and they brightened up the picture a little bit, and they put the green tint specifically in areas where it was intended to be. And so that's an example of how I don't know why studios do it, and I really don't. I don't know why they won't include directors when they come out with a new restoration or transfer of a movie. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't.
A lot of the times, though, from our experience, if you find a restored version of a movie and the director or the DP is not involved in it, it's not going to be a very good transfer. If the director or DP or even the editor is involved in it, then you're going to get a good, solid transfer.
Another bad example.
Oops.
Uh-oh.
Let me.
Okay. Let's just see if we can get Paul back. Having a little difficulty there, but I just wanted to continue.
We didn't need him anyways.
Well, just going on to the next question, and I'm sure Paul will be joining us shortly when he figures out what his technical difficulties are. I noticed that you guys tend to review retro films or films that may have been forgotten, like cult classics. Why is doing that important to you?
Well, a second, that's Paul. Yeah, he's trying to get back on.
Okay.
Well, you know, a lot of these movies that are just really, really good get lost in the shuffle. Going back from the first thing I think about is Coppola's The Conversation with Gene Hackman. That got lost in the shuffle because of Jaws and because of a couple other movies that came out around the same time, and so nobody knew about it or saw it. Then our favorite movie from William Friedkin, Sorcerer, came out exact same time. Star Wars, Superman, and Alien came out all around the same time, so it got drowned out. And you look at these marvelous, just terrific movies that get drowned out due to more popular popcorn summer movies. And so it was really important to us to let people know about these movies, that you get some really incredibly good movies that were lost in the shuffle. And a lot of our friends didn't even know about it. We'd bring over these movies and you're like, what's that? What's that about? The Impossible? What's that? Is that a Mission Impossible movie? And we're like, no, but you got to see it. It got lost in the shuffle. It's an incredible movie about the tsunami. And it's an amazing movie, amazing
with
work of
Ewan
film.
McGregor.
Yeah, Ewan McGregor and Tom Holland's debut, I believe. And so they watched and they're like, wow, that was really good. I can't believe we missed that. So it was important to us to let everybody know about these movies, especially ones like Sorcerer. I don't know if you've seen that, but you know, what's his name again? For some reason, I can't remember the name of the Roy Scheider. He's in that and a starring role in that, and it's such an interesting, great movie to watch, editing wise, and how they make it. And we did a segment on that on our channel for Sorcerer. So if you guys want to check that out, you can. And so yeah, we need to get the word out of these movies instead of, you know, there's nothing wrong with superhero movies. We love them as much as everybody else does, but then you get like hidden gems in between them that are just amazing. Recently, you know, with things slowing down, recently we saw Antlers, which is semi kind of big. It's kind of known, but still not as much as, say, you know, Shang-Chi and now Eternals. And we went to go see that, and that was a really good movie, really well done, good solid horror movie, and not many people know about that movie. And so we just want to get the word out. You know, these, like I've said, these movies are just so good that they deserve to be seen. They deserve some attention. And we've talked to a couple of the directors, not well, frequent, of course, but you know, some of the directors about that, and they said that yeah, we haven't got any attention whatsoever. And so we're like, well, we're spreading the word, brother. We're spreading it and letting people know about it. And they're like, well, thank you so much for that. And you know, I remember Kevin Feige saying that they wanted to take a 5-year break from doing Marvel movies so that these smaller independent movies can get some attention, which was really great for him, that he was able to do that. And so there are some indie films that did get some attention, but still there's a lot out there that aren't. And we just want people to know what these are, especially those who are like us that are really deep into filmmaking. You know, they're just great movies to watch and learn from.
Yes, and I think something else that your channel does for a lot of people who are interested in learning more about filmmaking and want to also be exposed to other types of films is that you allow the average person to learn about different films, and there really isn't anywhere else to go. I mean, they can go online and read some information, but I think that the in-depth types of reviews that you all are doing are so important for that reason, especially for movies, as you said, that get lost. And I did also want to ask you.
Just a second, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Paul wants to know if he's trying to log in again, but Paul wants to know if he could do it by phone, if he's not able to log in on the computer.
I suppose he could. I hadn't thought about that.
Okay.
I don't know how to do it, but
let me see what. All right, he says he's logging in.
Okay.
Well, I don't know what this actually happened on a couple of interviews we did before we started doing interviews. They would, like, for some reason when we use Zoom or whatever, it'll just like cut off or get laggy or one or the other. I don't know. For some reason he's still trying to get on.
I see him now. I see him.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
There you go.
So
hello there.
Where did I leave off? Because I was in the middle of saying something. Then I don't know if you heard it or not. Do you remember?
Well, we moved on to
fine.
We moved on to talking about it, why these smaller movies, you know, how we bring out like Sorcerer and stuff.
And cult classics.
Yeah, cult classics. Why it's important for us to.
Well, maybe Rob can edit around this because I wanted to say something else about going back to the quality.
Go right ahead, Paul.
Okay. So as I was saying before, I got rudely cut off. So one recent bad example of a studio that did not pay attention to quality is with Inglourious Bastards. And they did not include Quentin Tarantino with the new 4K or the DP. Nobody was included that worked on the film. and so they never went in and actually restored the film into 4K from the 35 millimeter negative. Instead, they just upsampled or upscaled the 1080p Blu-ray to 4K. And you can see a huge difference with that. There's a big lack of depth, not as much detail. The colors are like way too hot. The whites are blown out. And when you compare it to the Blu-ray, it just looks like trash, really. And so that's an example of a studio that does not involve anybody who was involved in the making of the film, because anybody who's involved in making a film, they want to look the best they can. And but I'll tell you who is doing the best transfers right now, and that is Blue Underground. They are releasing these cult movies from the 70s and 80s. In fact, I got their Maniac Cop 2 4K, and they are the best right now that I've seen. They very high quality. The video quality is at between 80 to 100 megabytes per second, when 4Ks from studios are usually between 50 to 60, sometimes 70 megabytes per second. And so right now they're really, I'm really impressed with their work right now. And then next to that is Arrow Video started doing 4K, and Shout Factory started doing 4K. Kino Lorb is too. And so all those boutique studios are really putting in the effort to really restore and preserve these films in 4K, and including the director, and also sometimes they include both the director and the DP for the restoration. And it's just spectacular. They're doing the better work than the studios are right now. And
sad to say.
Yeah, so studios just don't seem to really pay attention or care about preserving films, older films. And it's a shame, because older films are, I mean, you look at, I had a friend who said that I'm not going to watch any movie before the 2000s, and I said, why? And he said, because they all suck. They're so badly made. And I said, well, what about Raiders of the Lost Ark, Star Wars, Jurassic Park? And he said, well, okay. And then I said, but if we didn't have those, we wouldn't have the movies we have today, because the technology would have never progressed like they do today.
Oh,
Superman.
That are older than that, in the 40s and 50s and 60s. I mean, look at James Dean work. He only did 3 movies, but each of those movies, from East of Eden to Giant, are amazing. And so you learn from those great movies as well.
Yeah, so it's important for studios to preserve these movies, and for some reason they just not interested in doing it, and I don't know why. So yeah, these boutique studios are really the way to go, and I'm always eager for their new slate from month to month to see what they're going to bring out.
And is that why we see when movies are preserved, it's always by some sort of special foundation that's doing it, rather than Warner Studios or it'll be some special conservation group
exactly
that wants to restore. And I can't remember the one. I know Turner Classic Movies always talks about how they've been restoring them, and how 90% of the silent films are gone, and they have a foundation that works so hard to preserve what's there now. But also the Smithsonian, I guess, has tried to preserve.
Yeah, they have. I mean, really, it's about money, and they don't think that there's enough people out there that want to see these older films. My favorite film of all time is Treasure of the Sierra Madre with Humphrey Bogart. That's my favorite movie of all time. I love that movie. And it was, if you've ever seen it, it's ahead of its time, because it pits these people together, and it's about greed and paranoia and all these elements. And it was, when I first saw it, I was blown away. I was like, wow, this is way ahead of its time, because today that stuff is standard, where we have movies about paranoia and people pitted against each other. But back then they really didn't. And so I lost my train of thought. but studios they don't feel the general audience cares about going back to see these movies. And I actually know someone who works at preserving movie films. And I talked to him one day, and he flat out said, he said, studios, they'll work with us, but we have to beg them to work with us, or we have to pay them to allow us to go into their vaults and see what films are salvageable and what's not. So, you know, studios is all about money. And like I said, they don't feel, especially the younger generation, they don't feel they feel they could care less about these older films. So why spend them, you know, $100,000, $200,000 to preserve them if they're not going to watch them? Yeah. And that's their thinking. And go ahead.
And those foundations do such a great job preserving them. I mean, they treat them like they're prized possessions, immaculate. Criterion does a great job preserving these movies. I mean, they've released movies from the early 1900s, like 1917, 1920, and they do such a great job of preserving these movies. And like Paul said, that some may say, oh, they're old, they're not important, but that's like the filmmaking lineage. That's where they came from, all these ideas. Kurosawa inspired Lucas to make Star Wars. Star Wars inspired Indiana Jones and all the sci-fi action movies, Lord of the Rings and so forth. So without those older movies, we wouldn't have the movies that we have today.
Superman the movie from 78. If we didn't have that was the start of the comic book movies. If we didn't have that, would we have Avengers?
No. And something else that was very interesting, and I guess we could just briefly touch on this, is has to do with physical effects. And I've asked a number of filmmakers like both of you about physical effects and how, you know, obviously I'm around the same age as both of you. And I remember when that Superman film came out and how fantastic it looked. Yeah. And, you know, Christopher Reeve was flying through the air and it looked very real. And, you know, he almost looked weightless in some of the scenes. And with the woman, it's not Talia Shire, is it? His the woman who plays, yes, Margot Kidder.
I was about to say Margot Robbie. I'm like, no, that's not right.
Yeah.
I knew it was Margot.
Yes, exactly. And so I think it's very interesting because whatever they're trying to do with CGI, they're trying to replicate what was done with physical effects. Yeah. But the physical effects in that Superman film, especially the scene where Lois gets trapped in that car during the earthquake.
Oh, yeah.
And I just thought that was a very clever scene, you know, because it does look like she's getting buried alive, which it's supposed to look like.
It was amazing.
And and then he pulls her, you know, the car out, and then of course the fantastic part where he, you know, puts time back to like, I felt that sequence, you know, was kind of a masterpiece.
Yeah. The part that really has always stand out to me that I always go to is the helicopter rescue, when the helicopter is falling off the building and Lois Lane is falling and Superman flies up to catch her. Yeah. And me and Simon still quote the line today. We're like, who's got you? Got me? Who's got you? And
yes,
you know, that's the scene that always stands out to me is I mean, when you think about that in the 70s, late 70s, yeah, you had Star Wars, but that was really the first movie that actually used big practical effects in that way. And then you had Superman, and it's just amazing what they did. And if you look at the history of the making of Superman, it was grueling to the point where Richard Donner almost left because he didn't know how they're going to make Superman fly to make it look believable. Mm-hmm. And
I'm sorry. I did want to ask both of you, why does it feel like physical effects is so much more satisfying to look at than other types of effects?
You know,
because
we've been asked. We've been asked.
I was going to say
many times.
Let me talk first.
but the simple answer that I always go to is because they are real, just on a miniature level. I mean, you look at like Raiders Lost Ark with the boulder falling down. That really is a boulder falling down the hill. It's just miniaturized. It's just a smaller scale. So yeah, it really is real, just on a smaller scale. And it always looks so much more realistic that way. With computer effects, they can be really, really good, but it's very, very time consuming and spends millions of dollars to make it really good, make it seamless. Like Robert Zemeckis is a genius of that. I mean, if you see the movie Contact, there are so many hidden effects, computer effects that you don't even know that are effects. Forrest Gump, of course, and yeah, so it's very difficult to make computer effects look good and real. And
so your brain knows. Your brain knows what is real and what isn't. That's really what it comes down to. And so if you watch side by side, pit something that is full of CG and something that is practical, your brain knows immediately that's practical, that's fake. And I know that's fake. So do I feel the intensity? Do I feel the drama of that when my brain's saying this is fake, it's not real? When you go to Jurassic Park, I mean, I'm sure you remember when first time seeing Jurassic Park. I mean, I was shaking in my seat because it felt the T-Rex attack felt so real. Mm-hmm. If it was done with pure CG, it might be intense, but you wouldn't have gone in that realistic, scary feeling that you had while watching it. You wouldn't feel the intensity of those kids trapped in a car or what's going to happen. And so today, there are some movies you can't help but have CG, like, the Avenger, Marvel movies, DC movies, superhero movies. You can't really help it because you just need it. But what I think the best way to do it is half practical, half CG. And if you blend them together, it's more difficult for you to really spot what's real and what isn't because they're blended together. So, and that's what Spielberg found out on Jurassic Park. You blend like the Gallimimus run through the field when Sam Neill and the kids are being chased by them. That was CG, but yet the T-Rex attack was practical. So it, blending them, I think, is the best way to do it. And then it comes down to budget. But there's, I think, was it the Eternals, where there was a scene throughout the movie, the effects look great, except for one scene, and you could tell that they run out of money for the effects. And so that's the other thing too, is it's so expensive and so time consuming to do in CG that inevitably something's going to lack. And with practical effects, you don't have that. Another thing with practical effects is that you're creating something for the film. All the special effects people are creating something, so they're putting their passion and their creativity in making this creature or making this spaceship or whatever it is. And you get that on screen. You can always feel the passion of the filmmakers come off the screen when you're watching the film. And
so just hand it over to someone and say, "Here, do this for me," on a computer. And a lot of people may think that it's easier to do it by computer, and it's really not. We interviewed John Ottman, who edited a lot of Bryan Singer movies and Bohemian Rhapsody and stuff, and he said he was locked in a closet for 2 years in the dark editing that, and he said, and special effects was twice that at that time. And so special effects, like we said, to get it right, to get it good, where you really can't tell, takes a very long time to do it. You have to be a very patient and meticulous type of person to really do that.
And I'm guessing it, like, one of my favorite films that's loaded with a ton of special effects, because it had to be, was Peter Jackson's King Kong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I remember there was one interview where Peter Jackson talked about how he was trying to get a certain expression on King Kong's face, and it took 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I really tried so hard to figure out what point in the film that expression was, and I couldn't find it anywhere. But
yeah. I mean, your general audience doesn't really. They think that they can just type something in, make a graphic, and it's pour money into it, and it's done. And that is not so you will spend sometimes weeks, if not months, on one single shot that's only 10 seconds in the movie. And I mean, it's just crazy how much work goes into it. But you know, CG has its place, practical effects have its place, but I think the best movies is when, as I said, when they put them together, when they
use
put
it
in
as
CG and practical.
You know, everything you use in a movie is a tool to make the movie better. And that includes computer effects. You need to use that as a tool to try to make the movie better. And like Paul said, the marriage between practical and CG a lot of times is so much better than at least subconscious level.
I think what happens is that you see the practical effects and then you see CG and you kind of forgive the CG because there's practical there.
You know, they work on the movie harder.
Yeah. I'll give you an example. Me and Simon, we wanted to try a special effects scene because we were huge X-Files fans. I mean, we from the very first episode when it first aired till the ending, and around season 3 or 4, we wanted to try something, see if we could do any kind of special effects, and so we made a movie called Conspiracy, where Simon was this ex-NASA agent, and he was being contacted by he received transmissions from aliens.
Okay. And
one night, the aliens come to visit him. We don't show the aliens, but we show the effects of the aliens. So Simon, it was at night, and the scene was at night. He's laying in bed.
Are you going to give away your secrets?
And all of a sudden, and all of a sudden, his TV comes on with white static. The lights come on, and he gets up. You know, what's going on? And then he walks around the room, and all of a sudden, stuff from the shelf falls down and slides across the room. And he walks towards the door, and the door shuts by itself. Chairs fall, things like that. And then lights, and then lights from outside shine through the blinds of the window. And Simon goes up to the window, puts his hand up there, and says, "They're here, they're here." And we have sound effects and things. And how we kept trying to figure out how are we going to do this? Well, we're like, duh, all we got to do is tie strings to the object that we want to pull. So I have a little thin string off camera. And when the camera points at that object, you pull the string, and then that object pulls away or towards the camera. And so we did that. And then we had our brother was a construction worker. So we had big construction floodlights. So we just put that outside of our window and turned them on. So it looked like lights were shining through the window. And if you have the blinds kind of open, they're shining through the blinds. So it's kind of like Close Encounters did it way better, but it had that kind of effect of Close Encounters where the ship lights are going through the blinds. And then we talked about Tyler, our friend. We went to his house and we blended in all these special effects, sound effects. So we had the soundtrack to Alien 3 that we wanted to use for that certain scene. So we took that track, and then he came up with computer, like some kind of weird effects that he found, and he put that in. And then we hooked up our camcorder, hooked it up to VCR, hooked up the sound mixer to the VCR, and then we were all sitting side by side to each other, and Tyler's like, "Okay, go." And Simon pushes the music. Then he says, "Go." And then I put on the sound effects. And that's how we created the scene. And I actually was thinking of putting this on my channel on YouTube, just, for the fun of it, just to show what we've done in the past.
It's not good. I mean, it's not like, wow, this is awesome. I mean, it's really badly done, but still for something like that for the first time, for some people who don't really know anything about special effects, especially back in the early to mid 90s when they didn't have computer effects so easily available. It was fun, and it was neat to see.
Well, this is the reason I'm talking about this is because it's all about practice. If you want to be a filmmaker and you want to get out there, you have to practice. You can't just go to film school and think, "Oh, they're going to teach me everything." And that's what Simon and I did. Is we thought, okay, well, we want to do this, so how are we going to do it? And we did it practically, and we played around with it and taught ourselves how to make it look as good as it can be filmed on a high 8 camera.
And using the lens, the zoom, when it's when you have the thing polling and then you zoom back up or zoom in forward, it looks like the background's coming towards you. And
you remember the shot in Jaws where Roy Schneider's on the beach and he sees the first attack and the camera kind of like pulls back, but yet it's going towards him. And it kind of looks like the background, you know, everything's kind of pulling away but forward. And so we thought, how does he do that? And so we found out on our own, if we got a wheelchair and one of us is sitting in a wheelchair holding the camera and the other one's pulling the other person back on the wheelchair, while you're pulling back and zooming in, it has that effect.
Right.
And it's a really cool effect to have. And then again, today, you know, you can make movies on your phone. And if you try doing that effect on your phone using a plugin, it looks fake. It looks okay, but it looks fake. And so I always tell somebody, try not to get lazy and do things, computer wise, but try to do them practically. And you try to do it practically and your creative spontaneity comes in and you start putting more passion into it. Like we've talked about before, when you do it practically. And so that's our example.
That is a very good example. And I did want to ask, both of you collect physical media, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, Simon, I wanted to ask you, why is keeping physical media alive important to you?
Well, to me, some people will say that it's personal preference. Like we have a friend, our best friend, who says that he loves streaming now. He doesn't buy physical media at all, and he says, "Why do you guys keep buying physical media? I don't get it. I don't understand it." We're like, there's just something about physical media. You buy the 4K or the movie, and it comes in the box. A lot of times, there's something will come in the box with it, or the slip case, or beautiful artwork on the covers. One big thing that I really do not like about streaming is the latency issue, or like our power went out a couple of times. We're like, oh. And or you get that buffering circle, or and you don't get as good as a resolution, good as a picture or sound quality. With 4K now, you pretty much get really what it's intended, that what it was in the theater with, as far as picture and sound quality. It's so much crisper, so much cleaner. Besides worrying about buffering issues and stuff, you get to feel it. I don't know. There's something tangible about physical media that just makes you feel good, at least for me. And we got over 600 film scores on CD. We got up in the thousands of movies that we have on various formats. And it's just, I don't know, maybe Paul can explain it better than I can. It's comforting for me to know that I have this, it's mine. And the technical aspect, I don't know if I'm putting in the words right. Maybe Paul, can you?
Sure.
I think you did all right, Simon. I have another question for both of you. Why is it important to you guys to revisit Oscar-winning directors? And also, are we seeing a trend away from auteurs and more towards formula-style direction?
Before I answer that, can I just go back to the physical media?
Yes, you may.
Okay. This is why I love physical media. This is the Underworld 4K box set.
Yes.
Yeah,
you have all that.
Talking about that the physical media pieces that it comes.
Arrow Video put out movies like this, and I wanted to show this. This is something really cool that I've never seen before. But Warner Brothers put out of the animated movie of The Dark Knight. They also put it in a book that's the comic book.
Oh, that's so cool. I love that.
Yeah, so you have the whole comic book, and then on the back, you have the movies.
That is great.
And when Simon was talking about the quality issue, streaming, depending on what streaming service you are, it's between, as I talked about, Mbps, megabytes per second. Depending on what streaming service you use, it's between 15 to 25 Mbps. Physical media, Blu-ray, is between 30 to 60. And as I said before, 4K is between 60 up to 100. So when someone tells me, why do you prefer streaming, physical media over streaming? That's the example I give them, is I give them the megabytes per second, the difference between streaming and physical media. I said, so that right there kind of tells you which one is better for quality.
To give an example, when Justice League was premiered, Zack Snyder's Justice League was premiered on HBO Max, it really didn't look that good to us. We were like, oh, this doesn't look very good. And we found out that the MPS was very low. And then we heard that they got a lot of complaints about that. And so they decided to release it on 4K. And when we watched it on 4K, the quality is just so much better, so much greater.
Okay.
So physical media is worth it.
Okay. So that's my answer.
No, that's a great answer.
Let's go back to what you were asking.
Yes, certainly. I noticed that on your channel, and a lot of times when I'm asking these questions, and the viewers may not know, they haven't seen your channel, that you have quite a lot of content on there with a lot of interviews, and you focus on so many aspects of film and filmmakers. So one of the questions that I'm asking you is in relationship to the work that you've done there. Why is it important to you both to revisit Oscar-winning directors? And are we seeing a general trend away from auteurs and more towards formula-style direction?
We are, especially with superhero movies, because it's all formulaic. I mean, we hear Kevin Feige talk all the time that he has a plan, step-by-step plan. We hear about reshoots. I mean, reshoots isn't abnormal. I mean, they've had reshoots since the beginning of film, but sometimes we've heard reports of, like recently, Doctor Strange 2 has been reported as all of a sudden having massive reshoots. Sometimes, news makes it worse than it is. It could just be a little bit, we don't know. But I think that what happens is that the studio has a formula that they know works. They know brings in the money, brings in the audience, and they want to keep it that. Why change if it's not broke? And so they stick with that formula. Then when you get somebody in there that has their own idea, own opinions, I want to do it this way, I don't want to stick to the formula, the studio kind of balks at that, and they don't really support that director enough, to the point where they give him a low budget, and if they greenlit it at all, they just send them on the way for low budget. Well, and then they're well, sorry, and then they let me finish. and then they don't promote it, that person's film, and it's kind of just left in the dust. And it could be a great film, but people would never see it because their focus is on the new Marvel movie, the new DC movie, the new huge, big budget movie that's going to bring in audiences. And so this other movie that could be a great film is never seen. And that is really, really sad, because studios really they're completely different now than they were even 20 years ago. And all they think about is money, 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 and putting butts in seats to get that money, and not about what film really is and storytelling. I mean, Kenneth Branagh is bringing out Belfast, which is started Friday, I believe. I want to see that so bad, and I haven't heard one person talk about it, and I haven't seen any much promotion for it either.
I've seen promotion for it in the theaters.
What I'm talking about is like compared to a Marvel movie.
Oh yes, yes. I'm sorry. Yes,
you see the Internals preview left and right. Belfast, you might see a poster here and there or a trailer, but it's not promoted like it would be with a Marvel movie. Right. And that's really sad, because I hear that movie is just absolutely gorgeous and
it looks amazing. Even the trailer for that film is phenomenal, and it's during the Troubles, and it really is Henry Cavill's in it. It's just, the cast is amazing, and you're right, it's amazing.
and it's based on Kenneth Branagh's childhood, elements of his childhood, but okay, so it's a drama period piece filmed in black and white. Who's going to go see that? So yeah, but that's what the studios think, is no one's going to go see this. It may be nominated for some awards, but nobody's going to go see this. It's black and white, you know. And I have friends that will say that they would say, I don't want to see a movie that's in black and white,
right?
Or I don't want to see a movie that's subtitled. I don't want to read it. I just want to watch it.
It's set in 1950. No way.
Yeah, exactly.
He had subtitles, or in the Mandarin areas, Shang-Chi had subtitles.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, yeah, there's definitely a formula. Some studios still, I mean, I think you have to be a person like Quentin Tarantino that's already got his foot in the door to be with that creative creativity, or Steven Spielberg. No one's going to say no to those people. You have to be a director like that to make something that you really want to make. And look at Spielberg. He made movies that he wanted to make, Bridge of Spies and some other movies, and they all bombed.
Well, Bridge of Spies, of course, as you know, starred Tom Hanks and Mark Rylance, who's one of my favorite actors. And he, has done a Wildfell Hall and the Globe. And, he won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor in that film. And, he's considered one of, the greatest actors of our age. Yeah. And I'm sure there are a lot of people who are completely unaware who Mark Rylance is.
Exactly.
But Tom Hanks is a big name. And I'm sure when he was cast in that, and rightfully so, as his acting abilities certainly has it, they were probably expecting for more of a draw. Unfortunately, it didn't. And surprisingly enough, there were a lot of people, I guess, maybe perhaps nowadays, who aren't necessarily interested in a spy film of this nature. And it's a kind of a passive aggressive spy film, right?
Yeah.
Because, they don't come to blows or anything, but there's a lot at stake, and you can feel the weight of the film, and it's done very nicely. And, I think Mark Rylance plays it off so well. You have no idea he's a spy, and he's 100% a spy, And at that end part where they're on the bridge, and I guess maybe Tom Hanks might have been in a little bit of denial that Mark Rylance was actually a spy the whole time. And then the shock of it. And he's just going home, and even Mark Rylance keeps his cool through the whole thing. I'm sorry. I love that film so much.
Yeah, it's so good.
That's another reason why we do the Forgotten Film series, for movies like that people missed out on, that are just so wonderful.
But I just wanted to bring out Mike Rylance. He's in that movie. He's been in a couple other movies, but he never blew up. If he was put in a Marvel movie as a bad guy or whoever, he probably would have blown up. And that shows the differences there. And that's why the studio wants to keep with that formula that works for them. And whoever heard of? I was thinking of the actor. Andy Serkis. He started getting known as the mocap guy, but then he was in a couple Marvel movies, not playing mocap, but playing an actual character, and he blew up, and everybody loves him now. And that is really sad to me, that somebody like Mark Rylance, or an actor like that has spent over 30, 40 years in the film industry, never. And they've been in big movies like Bridge of Spies. He's in a Steven Spielberg movie, a Tom Hanks movie. You would think back in the day he would have blown up after winning the award. Today, where is he? And Jeremy Renner, he was a character actor for 20, 25 years before The Hurt Locker, and after The Hurt Locker, he won the award, and then he started getting more roles. But then when he became Hawkeye, his stardom just blew up. And those are just examples of, I'm sure the actors don't mind it, but the formula that the studio pushes now and wants to make and it makes stars of these actors. But then you have, like I said, Mark Rylance and other actors that never got that stardom. And, it just, like I said, it's just sad that nobody wants to see movies like that anymore. because they're so used to of these big budget movies. And I've even heard people say, well, I don't want to watch Bridge of Spies because it's 2 hours and 20 minutes, 2 hours and 30 minutes long. And then I said, but you watched Avengers Endgame and that's over 3 hours. So what's the difference? Well, yeah. So,
I wanted to rewind about Paul was saying about bringing in directors that want to do their own thing in some of these franchises. A perfect example is Gareth Evans with Star Wars Rogue One. For a couple years, we heard that he had this set design for Rogue One. It was going to be this epic, put the war in Star Wars type movie. He related
to Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah, it was going to be like a Saving Private Ryan meets Star Wars type film. And we saw the trailer where the TIE fighter comes down when she's on that ledge. And then you go see the movie and you're waiting for these scenes and they never show up. And that's one really good example of a director who wanted to do his own vision, wanted to do his own way, that Fox didn't want that to happen. They wanted to stick to
Lucasfilm, not Fox, but
Lucasfilm wanted to happen. They wanted to stick to what they wanted, not what the director wanted. And then you go to episode 8, where they let Rian Johnson do whatever he wanted to do. And people, very mixed emotions about that movie. From me, I really liked it. I thought it was very, to me, we did a video on it. To me, it makes sense that Luke went into hiding and, he aged and all that stuff. But anyways, we won't get into that. That's a big debate. But so, it's just very strange. I emailed Gareth Edwards about, is it Edwards or Edwards? Evans about it.
Edwards.
Okay, Edwards about it, to do an interview with him. And he said, I really don't want to talk about it. And in kind words, he said that Fox and Lucasfilm screwed him over on that movie and took the movie from him because they didn't like what he was doing with it. And, that happens a lot. And I forgot my train of thought where I was going with it.
Well, that just goes back to formula.
Yeah.
They wanted the formula.
They know what works and they want to
they wanted. And he didn't give that formula they wanted, and so they turned around and did it themselves. But
which is sad because the director doesn't get his vision of what he wants. And from what we heard about it, that movie probably could have been, really, really good. He's a competent director. He's a good director. He knows what he's doing. And so that movie could have been really good, or it could have been a disaster. We don't know.
Well, what gets me is a filmmaker like Steven Spielberg, and he releases, back in the day, you would go see a movie because Steven Spielberg directed it.
Yes.
And it didn't matter what it was about. If Spielberg directed it, you went to go see it. Today,
that was a big deal back then.
Today, Steven Spielberg puts out a movie and barely anybody sees it. And people aren't excited about it, except for people like us, that are film fans and
yes.
Well,
and
West Side Story coming out. I don't know anyone who's going to want to see that except us. A musical, and I don't know how long it is. I'm sure it's over 2 hours. And just redo a movie that was done 60 years ago. It's like, why do we want to see that?
Well, not just that, but then you have him direct someone like Ready Player One, which is like a huge Marvel type movie, tons of special effects, and it bombed because nobody really went to go see it.
But I think that Ready Player One is going to turn into a cult classic. That's just my prediction.
Yeah.
I believe so too. And that's what I've been finding is when these movies come out, nobody sees. A few years later, people start seeing them. They go through their streaming service. Well, what is this? I turn on. Wow, this is really good. And then word of mouth begins. Or someone like Arrow Video or one of these boutique companies suddenly puts out a special edition of it. And I've seen that myself in these Blu-ray 4K Facebook groups where a movie that I loved and that I thought everybody loved and everyone saw is nobody talks about. But when a boutique company puts out a special edition, they're like, ooh, I got to get that. And I said, well, that's a great movie. I've never seen it. And, it's just, people need to go back and look at these classic filmmakers, and not just Steven Spielberg, but Alfred Hitchcock, John Huston, you know, all these filmmakers, because they are what inspired filmmakers today. I mean, John Carpenter, without Halloween really paving the way to the 80s slasher movie and Nightmare on Elm Street with Wes Craven, would we have those type of horror movies that we have today?
No, we wouldn't.
Because and the reason being is because those movies, those directors inspired kids when they were younger, like Simon and I, and they grew up to become filmmakers, and they made their own version of a horror movie or an action movie.
Like the situational horror films now, or Blair Witch or something like that. Yeah. So I have another question for you. I have a few more questions before we end this fantastic interview, which has been wonderful. It's okay. It's all good. You guys have done so many great interviews with writers, actors, directors, and other creators. What were some that, or even one that stood out? And if you can't think of any particular one that stood out, can you please tell me more about the man who created V, The Visitors? It's because I'm a Visitor fan, so
same here. And that is actually one of our favorite interviews that we've done. And the main reason is because he actually went in and talked in depth about how he created V, where the vision came from, and it was all based on Nazis and Germany, what happened during that period. And he also based a lot of it, you know, he wasn't alive during that time, but he based a lot of other things in the series and in his work on his own childhood of what he went through with his parents and being bullied and, you know, whatever else. And that was really, really great, because I love it when the creator actually goes in depth about how they created or why they created this. You know, why did you create V? It wasn't just to make money. It wasn't just to make something, you know, to try to get popularity, but it was because it was based on this and that. And I thought that it was a new way of telling the story. And
it was a really wonderful interview. I mean, there's some things that we cut out for time that were just really fun to hear.
Oh my gosh.
You know, there was more on how he created Incredible Hulk and
this is and I'm sorry, the Incredible Hulk with Lou Ferrigno.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
and,
thank you.
You know, we had to cut some of it out because of time and some stuff happened. But you know, he was saying, and there is some of that in the interview where how Lou Ferrigno, you know, he's deaf, and so nobody really wanted to take a chance on someone like him being deaf, and they did. And you know, he's not a comic book fan whatsoever. But he got into doing Incredible Hulk and then Bionic Man, Bionic Woman, and he had really good stories. And it was really, really fun talking to him. He was really nice. I emailed him back, and we emailed each other back and forth for about 2 weeks before that interview started, and just really got to know each other. So yeah, that's definitely one of our favorites.
Another favorite.
One of our favorites actually is with Nicholas Meyer, and Paul will tell you about that.
Well, that was I don't know if that was my fault or not, but we did an interview forever. We've been trying to get an interview with Nicholas Meyer, you know, yes, director of Star Trek 2, 6, Time After Time. And he's always been an inspiration to us forever. And we've always wanted to talk to him. And finally, we got the chance to do so, and our schedules matched. And so before an interview, I always make sure everything's working. The mic, the camera, lights, everything's working. I double, triple, quadruple check everything. And because, you know, when you're interviewing someone like that, you don't want the mic to suddenly go out. You know, you don't want to look amateurish or incompetent. And so I had everything checked out, and the interview was going good. And I'm actually going to post this because it's just too funny. So he starts talking, and then I ask a question. But for some reason, something happened to my microphone, and I didn't realize it till after the interview. And I sounded like a hyper Mickey Mouse on cocaine. it was just like this. It was like, hi, how you doing? Type of thing. And so here I am talking to Nicholas Meyer, and he's talking, he's a very educated, proper type of guy. And I'm listening to him, and then all of a sudden I'm like, so when did you work on Star Trek 2? And it was just like, and what's even funnier is that he told me, he said, something's wrong with your audio. I don't know if you can hear it, but there's something a little off with your audio. And I'm thinking, because I can't hear it, I'm thinking, well, maybe it's going off and on, or maybe there's some interference there with the microphone. So I'm, scrambling away, trying to check all the connections and trying to plug in and out. I even told him, well, let's go ahead and stop this now and then reboot, because sometimes that will solve the issue. So we did that, and then I said, okay, so can I hear me now? He's like, yeah, you're still a little off, but I can hear you. I said, okay, well, so I sound good. And he said, yeah, let's go. So I do an 1.5-hour interview with him. After the interview, I go to my editing station, plug it in, and I hear that. And I'm like, oh no. And so number one, was so embarrassed. And number two, I still couldn't stop laughing because of how it looked and sounded.
I'm in my room after the interview, and I'm just doing something on my computer, and all I hear is, what the? And then I'm laughing hysterically.
And it is so funny. It is just so funny. And so, obviously I can't show that interview. And I when something has happened here and there with interviews where the audio isn't right on the person's when we're interviewing end or my end, or something happens, I can usually email them, say, hey, the audio didn't turn out. Would you mind if we did this again? And they're usually okay. They say, yeah, sure, no problem. We understand. Things happen. So I went ahead and did that with Nicholas Meyer, and I said, the audio was off. It really didn't turn out right. Could we do this again? And he said, well, I would like to, but I think you can handle it and edit around it. And I'm thinking to myself, how am I supposed to edit around this? I'm not going to re-record my voice. And so I'm trying to figure out, how can I show this? But I guess I could put a title card of what I'm asking instead of hearing my voice. But I don't know. I just feel like I can't really show this. But what I decided to do to salvage all that is I wanted to make a video about what can happen during an interview.
Yes.
Because we've done so many interviews, and inevitably something will go wrong, like we saw today with me. Something inevitably will go wrong. The camera will go out, mic will go out, something. And so I have a lot of people asking me, how do I conduct an interview and not look amateur, look professional? How do I conduct a professional interview? And so I want to salvage all that footage, and I want to use it in a video of how to do an interview, but this is what inevitably can happen. And what do you do? And when that happens, how can you salvage that interview? And so I've been wanting to put out that interview or that video a lot sooner, but I haven't gotten around to it. But I'm going to make that and put it and post that on our channel, so we can still have that interview. But it's a how to and what happens type of video instead of the full interview.
I think that would definitely get a lot of views, and I think it's great that you're willing to kind of show that, so that other people can learn and see that experience.
Honestly, it's too funny not to show it because it's just hilarious. And what's funny is that when my mom, Simon and I, we live with our mom, and to help her out. And so when she starts feeling down or sad or discouraged, I say, come here, Mom. And I put on the video, and that, that brightens her day. She just laughs, and she says, thank you for that. Another interview that I did that I loved was with Alex Proyez, the director of Crow, Dark City, one of my favorite movies, Dark City. And
I love Dark City.
Yeah, I loved it too. And that was when you have somebody of that caliber who's done so many movies, you think to yourself, I want to talk about every movie, but we can't, because you only have about an hour to, an hour interview. So what movies am I going to really talk about and break it down? And so, you know, The Crow, Dark City. I want to talk a lot about Dark City, which we ended up doing. So before the interview, you know, when you talk about The Crow, everybody wants to hear what happened to Brandon Lee. And since I was talking to the man himself, the director of the film of The Crow, before I went on recorded the interview, I asked him, you know, do you feel comfortable talking about Brandon Lee and what happened? And he said no, because it's still very hurtful to me. And he said, he said, honestly, Paul, sometimes I still weep at night over what happened, because it was his, you know, you're the director, it's your responsibility. And he felt responsible that things weren't done properly. And he said, I will talk about it a little bit, but I don't want to get into it. So I said, okay, that's fine. That's understandable. So I think, if I remember right, the only thing that we really got into was actually what happened with the prop gun, and you know, and so he talked about that. What's funny is that I did that interview. I talked to the director. He would know exactly what happened. But I've had comments of people in that interview, or I've heard comments from other people online saying, that's not what really happened. This is what happened. And I said, you just heard it from the director himself of what happened. I think he would know. And I said, you can't, you know, and because the media always blows things out of proportion or only tells half of what happened. But, you know, I won't get into what happened. If you want to know what happened, go check out that interview on our channel. I have a playlist of filmmaker interviews. But we got into in depth of Dark City, and he talked about the director's cut, that he was finally able to do his director's cut.
Yes.
And he talked about how the studio didn't believe in the movie. They had no idea what that movie was. And so they took it away from him and butchered it. And finally he was able to get his version out. But it was really, really fascinating to hear him talk about Dark City. And he said, I'll tell you something, Paul, that I have never told anybody that I've done an interview with. I've never told them this, but I'm not going to tell you because you have to watch the interview. So you have to go watch the interview to find out what he had to say. Oh, but but hey, how's he going to get views? No, but he said what's interesting is, because we don't do straight Q&As. We want to do a conversation, kind of like what we are doing on this interview.
Yes.
And that puts the person at ease, at rest. And so we talked to them beforehand, and, you know, we're not just saying, you know, matter of fact, yes or no, or, you know, Q&A questions. We have a conversation. We'll ask questions, but then it turns into a conversation. And so we put the filmmakers or whoever we're interviewing at ease, and they're relaxed. And when they're relaxed, they're a lot more open to tell you things. And so so he was very relaxed. I got him relaxed. And then that's when he said, you know, I'm going to open up about this. I'm going to tell you something I've never told anybody before about Dark City. And then he told me what it was. And so that is the best part of these interviews, is when the filmmaker feels relaxed with you, and then he starts telling you things that he normally wouldn't tell somebody else in an interview. And we've had that happen a couple times.
Yeah.
And
for me, if I could do my couple of
yes.
One of my favorite interviews is actually the first interview that we did with a video with Tony O'Dell from the original Head of the Class series. You know, nobody knows who he is, but he was we always did. But he played, what's his name, on Head of the Class?
Alan
on Head of the Class, with the kind of the Alex P. Keaton of Head of the Class. You know, he dressed real nice and everything. And that was a really cool interview to do. It was very relaxed. I think it was like 2 hours long or something around there.
Well, he went about 3 hours in the interview. We cut it down to almost 2 hours.
Yeah, but he would talk about, because he was in Karate Kid as well. So we talked about that. And then he was really close friends with Elizabeth Taylor, and he would tell stories about him going over to her during like Christmas or Oscar night and stuff. It was a really cool interview. Really, really nice guy. And
in fact, he was so relaxed talking to Simon that he said, hold on, when he was talking about Elizabeth Taylor, he said, hold on, let me go get something. He came back with some photo albums and started showing photos of Elizabeth Taylor and you know, all these classic actors that he spent time with at their house. And he went into stories about his experiences at Elizabeth Taylor's house during Christmas, and all the actors that he was surrounded by. And
he's not, nobody really, like I said, nobody really knows his name, so he's not like a real popular out there guy. But he's one of those actors that's been in everything and knows everybody in Hollywood, and is still doing stuff to this day. And really cool guy. And,
in fact, he is now a what actor teacher, or what do you call it? He teaches
like the actor studio or something, or
he's a
new
coach.
school, or
acting coach. He's an acting coach, and he was Zendaya's acting coach.
Still is Zendaya acting coach, and he said that every time has a new part, she'll call him up and they'll rehearse some parts, and he'll coach her and stuff. And so we talked a lot about that and everything. So it was just a really, really great interview to do, and everything just flowed so good. It was talking like to an old friend. It was just really good. Now, one of the interviews I wouldn't say is the worst interview that I did, but it's one that I really regret. One of the reasons is because I was really starstruck. The other reason is because I didn't get to talk about what I really wanted to talk about with him, and that was with Christopher Titus. I've been a fan of. We've been a fan of his 20 years or more, and so. I mean, he was so kind. I emailed him, and he was just so kind to do the interview with us. And he has a YouTube show, and he went on right after that. And I was a little pretty nervous because I really liked him and starstruck with him. So I kind of fouled up on some words that I wanted to ask him. And then what I really wanted to ask him was an episode in his show Titus. One of the last episodes was about, I think it was his niece being abused in school. And I don't know if anybody remembers, but it's with a baseball bat. She was going to hit her teacher that would abuse her in school with a baseball bat. And so they would call in Titus and his girlfriend, and they would have a discussion stuff. And she admitted, she said, he hurt me. I don't remember if it was molesting or what, but he hurt me really bad. And she started crying, and then he grabs the baseball bat. As she's saying that, like, there's no excuse for this. And then after she tells him that, he hands her back the baseball bat and says, swing away.
And the show ends.
It was such a powerful episode. And Paul, we talked about this a little bit with an episode of Raw. Paul and I, we suffered abuse in school. And so that episode was really really important for us to watch. And I wanted to tell him all this. Unfortunately, we didn't have the time because I think we only had like 30 minutes, and because he was off to do some other stuff. And so every time I see that review or hear it, I'm like, oh, I cringe at it because it's not what I wanted at all, and stuff. But
what's really funny, I think it's funny, is that we've done all these different directors and actors, but it's Chris Titus that starstruck Simon after all these interviews. But yeah,
it was credit to him being so nice to even do it to a channel nobody even knows. It just shows, he said that somebody gave me a chance when I was starting out, and look where I am now. So I give other people a chance as well. And so credit to him. It was wonderful talking to him, even though I regret some of the stuff in her interview. And yeah, I'd say Tony O'Dell for my favorites. Tony O'Dell and
Kenneth Johnson.
Kenneth Johnson, yeah, those were my two favorite interviews that I did. And Kenneth Johnson was writing a book at the time that he was releasing, so he said he didn't have much time to talk. But like with Alex Proyez, as we got into the conversation, he said, "You know what? We can talk a little longer if you want." I'm like, okay, great. So
yeah, we found out this too, and then we'll move on to another subject. But we found this too, that when we do an interview with a filmmaker or an actor or someone in the business, they tend to not. They're friendly, but they don't want to spend a lot of time. So they say, "Sure, I have 40 minutes, or I have an hour." But then when we get to start talking and they're comfortable with us, and I say, "Okay, well, our time is almost up," and they're like, "Well, you know what? I think we go a little bit longer. Do you have anything else you want to ask me?" And that happened with Alex Proyez, Tony O'Dell,
Brandon Braga.
Yeah.
that happened with him. He was like, sure, we got 35, 40 minutes. And then as we were talking, he's like, you know what, we can keep going, guys. I like this. And,
the best one was John Ottman, who composer and editor, and Lauren Balfe, composer. They both, we did this over by phone because we didn't have Zoom and stuff then, but we did it by phone. But John Ottman said, I got maybe 40 minutes. Sure, we'll talk. And as we got to talking, we just kept talking and became so comfortable with each other. And he's like, okay, well, continue. Let's continue. And I usually write down what I want to say or what I want to ask. And I didn't have anything written down. And then so I'm thinking, okay, what do I ask? What do I ask? So then I started thinking, okay, me as a person who loves film, who loves filmmaking, what have I always wanted to know about editing and composing? So then I started asking that with both John Ottman and Lauren Balfe, and they were both impressed by that. And they said, I've never been asked that. Those are fantastic questions. And then, and so that's the number one key I tell people of interviews is always make the person comfortable. If you're not comfortable, they won't be comfortable. So you have to be comfortable too. And just
don't ask the standard questions that everybody asks.
Yeah, don't ask the questions don't go on YouTube and you see interviews of them on YouTube. Don't ask the same questions that they're asking because they've been asked those questions a billion times. If you ask something new, then they're a lot more up to talking to you about it because they haven't talked about that. Right. And so I always tell people, I said, just relax and have a chill interview. Don't think you're going to say something dumb. Don't worry about that. Just have a relaxing interview and it will go from there. It'll take itself, it'll take the interview. Go ahead.
That is excellent advice. And unfortunately, I have to end the interview. I don't want to. You guys are so much fun to talk to. I feel like we could go on for 8 hours with this.
Yeah. Well, we should do this again. And
I would love to do it again. And maybe we could do a series just on filmmaking if you're interested. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
Yeah, sure. Definitely.
Yeah.
I
love doing that.
Okay. I did want to say one thing before we leave, and that's a little bit about my dad. As you know, and some other people that have watched Rob's channel know, our dad passed away in July. So it's been 3 months or so. And he was a huge, huge inspiration in our lives. I mean, when we started getting into filmmaking, when we were 13, 14 years old, he gave us the camera to do so. And he encouraged us to do so. He encouraged us to make a short film to send to Steven Spielberg. And he's always encouraged us. And he loves film like we do. And so, he got sick with a lung disease called IPF. And it's an incurable disease. It's caused from fibrosis. It's caused from scar tissue in the lungs. And the doctor said that when you're diagnosed, you have about 5 years. So during that, he lasted about 4 years. So during that time, we spent as much time as we could with him. It was easier for Simon and I because we do live with our parents to help them out because they were getting older. So, we would watch movies with him. We would talk to him, give him all the love and support he needed until the very end. And in fact, a hospice nurse told us that if it wasn't for as much love and care that we showed him, he wouldn't have lasted as long. So I just wanted to say that anybody out there that's watching this that is going through similar circumstances with either one of the parents, you have to show them the love and care and support that they need. Otherwise, you're going to regret it. And you don't want things to end on any kind of regrets. So, that's the biggest takeaway I got from it is you can't have any regrets. Otherwise, you're going to beat yourself for the rest of your life over it. So, and also, you're not alone. Lots of people out there are going through the exact same thing that you're going through. And so, yeah, that's really what I wanted to say. But, yeah.
Well, I want to dedicate this interview to your dad, and the inspiration that all our fathers are to us, and that special relationship that you have with a father. So, you know, and also I just want to give my condolences to you and your family.
No, thank you.
You know, you're in our thoughts and prayers. And also thank you for joining me today for the interview as well. And it was such a pleasure speaking to both of you.
Yeah, it was a blast. We had so much fun. We like we said, we got to do this again. We have to.
Yeah, definitely.
We definitely will. And, you know, let's get our schedules together.
Yeah, it's a little difficult, but yeah.
We're going to make it work. And I'd love to do something on, you know, on making films and also just on stuff that you love about films too. Cause I know sometimes we do these analytical shows about films, but I also like to hear what people love about certain films. So if there's something that you want to talk about, something that you loved that you haven't talked about yet, or you just want to talk about, you should also put that in too. So, so I look forward to that.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Definitely.
So thank you so much. And for those of you viewing, thank you for watching this wonderful video with Twin Flicks, Simon and Paul Gilmore. And stay tuned. We're going to have more videos with them. And remember, everybody, be kind.
And live long and prosper.
Yes.
Thank you all for watching.